to Queen Victoria's time. We're talking about Aberdeenshire, which of course is lots of it very, very beautiful. The landscape there is magnificent. And as you say, very significant that that rather lovely image of the Queen and the Duke, released when the Duke died, was indeed in the hills above Balmoral, on this enormous estate that the Queen has there.
Yes, that's right, and the Queen has been coming here regularly with her family for the summer and into the early autumn, year after year after year. It's very clear that this place is somewhere for which she holds extremely deep affection. We just see another police car going through the gates there of Balmoral Estate. Yes, Hugh, you're right. I mean, there is definitely an affinity. I mean, if you look back through the newsreel footage, back through the years, here she was in the 1960s, buying an ice cream for one of the young princes just along the road in one of the local shops. One of the few places really where, I'm not saying the Queen routinely walks up and down the streets of Ballater and Braemar, but it would be a place where she would not be troubled by people locally if she were to do so, because people are very used to seeing senior members of the royal family. Indeed, I remember one occasion somebody telling me that just outside these gates here, they were driving along and there was a car waiting with its indicator on to turn into the gates, and as they drove past, they realised it was none other than Queen Elizabeth at the wheel.
Well, James, thank you very much. James Cook with some nice memories there of the Queen and life in Balmoral. But today we are reflecting on the state of the Queen's health, sadly, and we're just waiting to see whether Buckingham Palace or the officials at Balmoral make another statement, having said at lunchtime that the Queen's doctors are very concerned about the state of the Queen's health, that she is comfortable, that they had no more to say at that point, but they felt it necessary to convey the fear and the anxiety that was being felt, and that is why, of course, we've now seen the Duke of Cambridge, Duke of York, the Earl and Countess of Wessex, and some others making their way to Balmoral. They've arrived there. The Prince of Wales already there. The Duchess of Cornwall too, the Princess Royal is there, so the family is gathered, and we're told that the Duke of Sussex, Harry, is on his way, but he wasn't with the party that arrived a short while ago. Watching the images with me, Nicholas Witchell, our royal correspondent, and Nick James there was underlining the special place that Balmoral holds, because really, some people may be wondering why the Queen in September is in Balmoral. Why is she not back in Windsor or even in Buckingham Palace? But it's important to underline that that's normal. That's what she does.
And she, of course, she loves to have the routine, to have the sense of confidence that you get from an unchanging routine. And so much of her year never changes. So yes, I think the annual trip up to Balmoral is really very important to her, and it is somewhere where she feels very comfortable, very much at ease, somewhere that she has known all her life. So the time is approaching 6:30 now, isn't it? I was struck by what James Cook was saying about the grim faces that he noticed on the faces of the members of the royal family as they drove into Balmoral Castle a short time ago. We are still waiting to see if there is something from Buckingham Palace. There is nothing to report on that front at the moment, but of course that could change at a moment's notice. The situation, as we understand it at the moment, continues to be that there is widespread and deep concern about the health of the Queen, following the statement by her doctors this morning. Clearly there has been some episode which has occurred overnight, which has given rise to that concern, and which prompted the doctors and Buckingham Palace to put out a statement indicating that there is concern about the Queen's health. Members of her family have broken off and travelled to Scotland. Prince Charles and the Duchess of Cornwall were already there. They have travelled across to Balmoral Castle, where they have also been joined by the Princess Royal. And other members of the royal family, 4 members of the royal family, have travelled up from London on an RAF flight. The Duke of Cambridge, the Duke of York, and the Earl and Countess of Wessex.
There is expectation now, clearly, Nick, if we look at the images here of Buckingham Palace, and the area in front of it dominated, of course, by the Queen Victoria Memorial at this end of the Mall. But crowds now starting to gather at those gates, where announcements in the past have been made, of course, about all kinds of things and events in the royal family's life. But I think today reflects really a crowd which is starting to gather, just basically expressing concern and just hoping for the best, is how I put it.
Yes, I think that is the fairest way we can put it, Hugh. Millions of people here and elsewhere will be hoping for the best, but they will be, I think, now fearing the worst and perhaps preparing for the worst. But we must continue to hope that whatever news we get from Buckingham on Privy Council terms. So I think that that is the fairest indication that we can give to our viewers, both here and around the world at this stage, that there is, as we keep saying, there is profound concern, there is deep concern, but at this stage we do not have any further news from Buckingham Palace.
Nick, we're just looking at these images here because, of course, they are really reflecting people's deep alarm and deep concern about the fact that the Queen is extremely unwell, and of course that we are expecting the news from Balmoral that she's having treatment, or that indeed they are unable to help Her Majesty anymore. A few moments ago, Buckingham Palace announced the death of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. The Palace has just issued this statement. It says the Queen died peacefully at Balmoral this afternoon. The King and the Queen Consort will remain at Balmoral this evening and will return to London tomorrow. Within the past few minutes, Buckingham Palace has announced the death of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. To recap on the statement, on the death of her father, King George VI. She heard the news while staying at a game lodge in Kenya at the age of 25, and her coronation at Westminster Abbey was watched by more than 20 million people. She was married to Prince Philip for 73 years until his death in April of 2021. And Charles, their first child, was born in 1948. He now becomes the new king. In 2015, Her Majesty passed Queen Victoria to become the longest reigning monarch in British history. And in February 2022, we saw the 70th anniversary of her becoming queen. And she made more than 250 visits to Commonwealth countries and was head of state in Australia and Canada and New Zealand. And Winston Churchill was Britain's Prime Minister when she came to the throne, and Liz Truss was her 15th Prime Minister. The BBC is interrupting its normal programmes to bring you an important announcement. This is BBC News from London. Buckingham Palace has announced the death of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. In a statement, the palace said the Queen died peacefully at Balmoral this afternoon. The King and the Queen Consort will remain at Balmoral this evening and will return to London tomorrow. The death of Her Majesty brings to an end the longest reign in British history, spanning 8 decades of immense change. Throughout that time, Her Majesty was the one constant presence in public life, a head of state who personified stability and reassurance. Her life had been dedicated to the service of the people, and her reign was characterised by a steadfast sense of duty. Elizabeth was just 25 when she came to the throne in 1952 on the sudden death of her father, King George VI, as Britain was still recovering from the Second World War. She was sustained by her 73-year marriage to the late Prince Philip. Her strength and stay, as she once described him, was at her side for 3 major Jubilee celebrations. Elizabeth II was the most widely travelled head of state in history, the Queen of 15 nations, head of the Commonwealth of 54 countries and territories. Her Majesty's death brings the second Elizabethan age to a close, and a long and momentous chapter in British life, a reign marked above all else by a sense of service to others, a reign unlike any other in the long history of Britain and the Commonwealth. Our royal correspondent, Nicholas Witchell, is with me as we report the news of the death of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. And one thinks immediately, Nick, first of all, of the loss for the royal family.
One does. This, for the nation, for them, this is an absolutely massive moment. The moment that so many people have dreaded for so long has come. It's a moment of great solemnity and national sadness. It's hard, really, fully to take it in. It's no great surprise, given her age and her declining health. But nonetheless, it is a very considerable shock to feel that she has died. Millions of people, I think, as they learn this news, will feel a sense of personal loss. And I think many people will find it rather disorientating. Let's just understand this moment. It isn't just the death of the longest lived, longest reigning monarch in British history, a monarch who has been there in the background to our lives for most of us, for all of our lives. It is the end of what I think history will judge to have been one of the most remarkable reigns in the 1,000+ years of the British monarchy, a reign which will be remembered and talked about in years to come. Now, whether you are a monarchist or not, and we know, as we've said this afternoon, that not everyone is, she was a monarch who earned the widest possible respect here in the United Kingdom and throughout the world. It's the end of the reign of Elizabeth II, a monarch who always put duty first, who brought dignity and decency to the highest office in the land, who embodied the best of qualities, who's been a focus for national unity and identity, and who has been the still, calm centre of stability and reassurance to this nation and the other nations of which she has been head of state for more than 70 years, while so much around her has changed. She has been a distillation of our national identity. She has been constant in an ever-shifting world, constant, steadfast, dependable, dutiful. These are all rather old-fashioned words, old-fashioned concepts even, but I think that they sum up what she brought to the role of monarch. We recall the pledge she made on her 21st birthday. I declare before you all that my whole life, whether it be long or short, shall be devoted to your service. Well, she truly remained true to that pledge. It was a life of finely judged service, true to the principles of constitutional monarchy, driven by duty, sustained by faith. And we recall also the message that she issued when she reached her 70th birthday in February of this year. You remember the message that was issued? She wrote, "I remain eternally grateful for and humbled by the loyalty and affection that you continue to give me." She said, "I look forward to continuing to serve you with all of my heart." And she signed that message, "Your servant, Elizabeth R." Well, that servant has gone. The end of the reign of Elizabeth II, Elizabeth the Great, as many people will regard her. That reign has ended. And we have a new king.
Yes.
The crown passes invisibly, but immediately, imperceptibly. Charles is now our king and our head of state. Camilla is now Queen Consort. It remains to be seen what name he will take, but we will refer to him as the king, and he will lead the nation's mourning for his mother. As you say, she came to the throne just a few years after the end of the Second World War. She succeeded to the throne in 1952 after the death of her father. And on the night of her coronation, in a broadcast on the BBC, she said, "Throughout all of my life and with all of my heart, I shall strive to be worthy of your service." And as that message, and as the message she issued on the 70th anniversary of her accession showed, if there is one word that I think is the key to the success of her reign, I would suggest it's not actually duty, the word which is normally associated with her, it's humility. Because for all of the grandness of her position, here is the coronation, the imperial state crown being lowered onto her head by the Archbishop of Canterbury. For all the grandness of her position, it never went to her head. She had, I think, an instinctive understanding that as a hereditary monarch, she had to win the trust of the people of this country and the other countries of which she was queen. And that, I believe, is what she did. She gained it and she kept it. She kept the monarchy strong. Now, of course, there have been a few bumps along the way. It would be extraordinary if there hadn't been. Bumps which have almost without exception been caused by other members of her family. But she pursued her role with that sense of humility and by putting duty first. And she was at heart, people who knew her, it's funny to talk in the past tense now, isn't it? She was a very down-to-earth, a straightforward and unpretentious woman, rather reserved, certainly in her early years. There was none of that sort of vainglorious and overbearing behaviour that we've sometimes perhaps seen with other members of her family. For 70 years, she's been the constant, unchanging presence in the background to our lives, the head of the nation, as she's sometimes been referred to, above politics, but with a shrewd interest in and a grasp of politics and of political figures. So we now look back on, and there will be so many tributes now, as people take this in, as they come to terms with their own emotions. And I'm quite sure there will be many people who are very emotional at this moment as they learn of this news, the death of the Queen. But this nation and so many other nations will now pay tribute to this long life of service which has now ended.
Symbolised everywhere, Nick. The flags are being lowered, and the rainbow, along with the lowered flag, at Windsor, the favourite home of the Queen. So many years. Flags lowered already at Buckingham Palace. And so many elements, Nick, of your appreciation and tribute will be echoed by political leaders at Downing Street. We're expecting Liz Truss to say something fairly soon. The Prime Minister will offer her own sympathy to the royal family, and she will, of course, have her own words of appreciation for the long service of Her Majesty. And there'll be other political leaders too wanting to pay tribute to a lifetime of service.